Hey, what's up you guys, people of the internet, everyone who clicked on this very video. My name is Cass, and today I'm going to give to you a giant Grishaverse review. I couldn't think of a word of review that started with a G. It's fine. Over the month of February, I read all 6 of the Grisha books. And now I'm going to review them to you. I read 6 of Trilogy and Crooked Kingdom first, but for the sake of the review I'm gonna start with the Grisha trilogy because chronologically it makes sense. I'm gonna do it by series, and in case you only want to hear about one of them, timestamps are going to be in the description. It is going to be mostly non-spoilery, but I might mention some spoilers. If that's the case, I'll put a big spoiler over my head a second or so before I start spoiling things. I'm going to systematically talk about world building, plot, characters, and my overall thoughts on all of these series, and also Leigh Bardugo's progression as a writer, because I think it's really evident in these books. Yeah, that's about all I have to say as an intro. Let's get going. So first is the Grisha trilogy. I am going to speak about this as a trilogy, not about every book as its own thing, because I don't remember. I read these back to back to back, and I don't remember where one book ends and the other begins. It's all a big blur. It's fine. I'm forgetting all the details. I don't remember anything. It's fine. We're gonna review it anyway. My first point is world building, and that's the biggest reason people say you should read the Grisha trilogy instead of Six of Crows first, because it gives you an actual understanding of the world, whereas Six of Crows kind of throws you into the deep end. When I started reading it, I was more confused than ever. Maybe not more confused than the first time I read Six of Crows, but it was a closer thing. And though this trilogy does explain some more about how Grisha work and how the world works, I think there's still some, maybe inconsistencies is not the right word, but things that are unexplained. There's Grisha and there is black magic, which I think is called Mesmerist. I'm not sure. We get no explanation about how Mesmerists work, only that's bad and you shouldn't do it. And the Darkling does it, and at some point Elena does it, and what's his face, I made the Amplifier, did it, and it makes no sense. I was still confused. So if you want to read it only so you understand the world a little better, I would say don't do it. Because the plot, as many people say, is not that interesting. I don't remember anything that happened already, and I read these books. I read the last book, I finished it about a week ago, which means that I should recall any of the things that happened. So yeah, the plot doesn't really stand out of all 2012 YA fantasy, in my opinion. And I especially felt like the second half, well, I think that was the first half of the third book, maybe, I think, wasn't necessary at all, and it was kind of annoying. To get into a bit of a spoiler here, in the third book they're looking for the third amplifier, they find out it's Mal after all, and that takes them half a book to figure out, and they're just hunting across the country, and it's super annoying, and I don't think it was necessary. And I was thinking about how could they have fixed this, because just finding the third amplifier after all, they'd be oh no, it's too quick, they found the sea whip really quickly, maybe that wasn't a good idea, which is fair enough. So I'd just make 2 amplifiers, make it a duology, which that would have been fine with me. But either do that, or have Mal know that he's a third amplifier. Because I think that would have added something to his character if, in the third book he was ready to die for Elena. But in the second or first book, I think the beginning of the second book, he was yeah, I don't really care that much about Ravka, I just want to leave with you and live happy lives together. Which is fair enough. But I feel like it would have been interesting if he knew he was the last amplifier to see that struggle that he still has of like just wanting a mundane life and not really being patriotic and caring about his country, but caring for Alina and knowing she wants that, but also knowing that if she actually goes up against a Darkling, she will likely lose and that she would have to kill Mal. Like, if Mal knew all of that was going to happen, that would have given him some super interesting struggle in like, how does he tell Alina? Does he give up his life still? Does he like keep it a secret? I feel like, at least in the beginning, he'd keep it a secret, and then like, how does he breach that to her? That would bring some very interesting dynamics, and I think that that's something that was missed, because as I'll go into in a minute, the characters were super uninteresting, and I feel like this would make Mal's character more interesting, but it will also make the plot more interesting because they would have some actual struggle, like, within that little group, instead of just going, oh, now we're going here, oh, now we're going here, oh, we're going here to look for the amplifier, we're going here to look for the amplifier, you know? So I feel like that would have been a better way to spice the plot up a little bit. And then characters. I feel like characters are my worst disappointment in this story. I was expecting it, but I'd have had 6 frows. And spoiler, but the characters in it are amazing. So I was super disappointed by this because the world had a lot of potential, the plot had a lot of potential, but the characters just didn't do anything. Especially Alina. I know this is like, so many people have said this already, but she is very passive as a protagonist. And I feel like that's her worst. Like, she's also annoying and jealous and indecisive, but, well, indecisive is part of that. But I think that she doesn't make any decisions in the whole series. Like, she's just like, her only decision is which plan of like 2 to go with. Or like, someone comes up with a plan, yeah, we'll go with that, yeah, we'll go with that. And it's annoying. It's fine as a side character, but your protagonist needs to take action. That is the whole deal with the protagonist. And she doesn't do that, which is annoying. And I feel like this story would have been so much more interesting if like someone like Genya or Zoya even had been the protagonist. Like in Cars, we see the potential of Zoya as a protagonist, and I feel like that already does way much more than Alina did for the story. So I think she's super interesting. I thought some of the side characters were cool. I love Nikolai, I love Genya, I love David. In the last book I like Idrik and Harsha. All of them are like super cool. But we follow Alina, who does nothing. So I feel like that, though I already knew Alina was going to be uninteresting, but having such interesting side characters made me very disappointed in the story as a whole. There's like a love square here, and I don't think that's a spoiler, but if you think it's a spoiler who are interested in Alina, which, why would you, but like, that's a spoiler. Anyway, so she has the internal conflict of, ooh, Mal likes me, oh, the Darkling likes me, Nikolai likes me, who do I like, do I want to be with? And it's annoying. Especially because she knows that both the Darkling and Nikolai only want her for her powers. And the Darkling is gross and manipulative about it. Nikolai is just pretty candid about it. He's just like, yeah, it would be a political alliance. Let's do it. We might fall in love. Who knows? Doesn't really matter that much. So instead of recognizing that and going, Mal actually loves me for who I am. Let's go be with him. Alina is still like, ooh, but the Darkling, he understands me. Yeah, he tried to enslave me, but he understands. And ooh, Nikolai, he's charming and cute. And Mal is being annoying. So, yeah, it annoyed me because it existed, but it annoyed me more because it was unnecessary. And as the last point on character, I feel like no one really developed that much. Alina, maybe a little bit. Did she change? She was less scared. The only time she actually stood up for what she wanted was on the end, when she was like, yeah, I'm not going to be the Sun Summoner anymore. Plot-wise, the end. I was kind of sad that Elena lost her powers because that was the one thing she relished in using. But then again, I also feel like being with Mal was something she wanted, like, from the beginning. And she didn't develop that much as a character where I was like, yeah, that was what she wanted as a kid, but it's not what she needs or wants anymore. It was just kind of like, yeah, she's still there, I guess. So that was sad. Overall, I think it was a fun ride. They read very easily. They're super fast to read through. Nikolai's banter is like a good 70% of my enjoyment of that, as well as like all the other characters bantering, like Harsha's stupid cat things and Toya's poetry and stuff like that. That was really fun. In the second half of the last book we didn't have that much because Nikolai was a bird, but yeah, it was a fun ride, and I would say I had a good time reading them. Did I feel like it was entirely worth the time I spent on it? Not really. Would I recommend reading them for world building purposes only? Not really, because it takes quite a long time, and I don't feel like you get that much out of it. I would more recommend just like looking up the wiki and like seeing how Grisha work a little bit, and then just like be confused for the first few hundred pages of Six of Crows, and then really love it. My personal thing, but I am glad that it exists because it has so much potential, and it gave birth or the possibility for these other books to exist, which I think are great, and it gave those characters that have all the possibilities to develop in the Nikolai trilogy. So yeah, I'm glad they exist. I'm decently okay with having read them, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend them. The book I would recommend is Six of Crows. I read this first, and a lot of people are like, oh, you want to understand the world building. That was true for the first couple hundred pages, but I feel like I got a hang of it. Especially because Six of Crows doesn't focus on Grisha that much. So you don't really need to know that much about Grisha. You get taught a little bit. Nina's a heartrender. What does that mean? She can control bodies or something. That's all you really need to know. What else? Like, they mention it, I think already in the prologue. Like, Joost is there, talking about Anya, who's the healer, and Red Franco, who's a squaller, and stuff like that. Like, you are kind of thrown over the deep end, and you will be a bit confused, but I do think it makes sense if you just roll with it and don't think too much about it. And I feel like the world where we are is much more immersive in Six of Crows than it is in Grisha. And maybe that's because I'm Dutch and Kettledam is based on the Netherlands, that I can very vividly imagine what everything looks like. But I do think she does better at describing what things look like and what people are wearing and what everything looks like in Six of Crows, so that makes for a more immersive world. So I think not focusing on Grisha that much was a good choice, because the world is crafted very beautifully, and I feel like she could focus more on what things actually look like without having to think about how Grisha would influence that. Yeah, so that's it for world building. About the plot, I think this plot is way better. Six of Crows starts out a little slow according to some people. I personally didn't hate that, both because I was thrown into the world pretty blind and had needed some time to figure out what was going on, and also because I feel like characters are the most important part of a story, and this was definitely a character-driven story. And the plot starts out a little late after you get to meet these characters and you know them a little bit. So I personally didn't mind it. But if you're looking for a heist novel, maybe this is not it. But the heist itself is really fun, and I love the detail that's put into it. And especially in Crooked Kingdom too, you see like everything interconnects, and I think that's some great attention to detail, like where Kaz does one thing, we see one part of a job, and then later we find out that like that connects to like 3 other things, and like it's very meta, and I love that detail. And obviously it's not super realistic, it's storytelling, but still it's some great storytelling. I think it's done very well. I love just the planning and execution of all of it, and I wish I could do that, and it's something that I definitely strive for in my writing. And overall, I think it's a great plot, even if the plot's not the focus, 'cause the focus is the characters. I love the characters so much. Most of the times when I read a story with a big cast of characters, there's 1 or 2 that I pick out and I'm like, you are my favorite. But with this story, I feel like I loved all of them. Not in Six of Crows, the first book. I didn't care for Willem that much, and I didn't care for Matthias that much. But when I read Crooked Kingdom and they developed, I fell in love with them as much as I fell in love with any of the other characters. And Matthias is currently, together with Jesper, my favorite character. All of the characters are very real, and they have greatly developed backstory, which just works into the plot very nicely. And they are all not good people, but interesting people. And they all have different motivations to go on the same job. And that's amazing. And especially, that's something that I think characters that Bardugo like develop the most in. From Grisha to this is like ridiculous growth, and it's amazing. I think that has to do with an interesting developed backstory, mostly the motivation, I think, and how different that motivation is between all characters. Because if you look at Grisha, most people's motivation was just like patriotism, and then Mal's motivation was Alina, and that's it. And the interesting thing about having anti-heroes is that you can have much more interesting backstories or motivation. Nia and Matthias then are still like righteous as fuck and patriots, and still like want to fight for their country both, but they both do it in such an interesting way, and that shift of morals too is like, I love that a lot. And another thing that I think she grew in really is development. Like I said, in Grisha, I didn't feel people were developing much at all. Whereas if you look at the beginning of Six of Crows and the end of Crooked Kingdom, though, all of those characters are in a completely different place in their life, and they have all changed so much over the plot and become closer to the people they want to be. And I think that's super, super amazing. In the Grisha trilogy, I didn't care about any of the characters. They all could have died before my eyes and be like, oh, well, I guess it's over now. But in Six of Crows, like, I would die for all of them. I want to acknowledge for a moment that there are some flaws with it. I heard some race discussion be brought up, where, like, it's problematic that Kaz kind of has so much control over Inej and Jasper, who are the only people of color in the series, whereas Kaz is a white person, and how that's problematic. And I want to acknowledge that and say that I agree, and could be fixed by Kaz just being a person of color. So Netflix adaptation, let's do that. But overall, I want to say that I adore this series, and I'm sure there's more flaws that I have not personally picked up on because I'm not a super critical reader, but I love it a lot. I would die for all of these characters. I want to read it over and over again. I actually remember what happened because the Grisha trilogy is already a blur. I am personally very glad that I started with this one, because I don't think I would have picked it up if I'd read the Grisha trilogy first. So I'm glad I did that. Yeah, and I didn't rate the other one. I think as a whole I give it like 2.5 out of 5 stars. It tried. This one, however, I would give it 4.5 out of 5 stars because I love it a lot, even though there's a few flaws. Lastly, we have my darling, King of Scars. Yeah, you do need to read the Grisha trilogy to read this. A friend of mine asked if she could read it without reading the Grisha trilogy, and I was like, yeah. I mean, if you just log the Wikipedia, just know what happens in the series without actually reading it, you could. But you do need to know how the war went in this series, in the Grisha series, to understand the trauma the characters have gone through in this series, and to know who everyone is. As world building goes, though, I still don't really understand what the Grisha limit of the power is. Exactly. But I think that that's kind of what this series is going to be about, because Zoya did that thing with the thing, you know? And I think the limit of power is something that's going to be stressed, and with what's his face who made amplifiers is his idea of Grisha power, that it is all pretty much the same thing, is going to be experimented on. So I hope that in the second part to this duology we will finally understand what Grisha actually means. So yeah, we're getting closer to knowing how it works, but I feel like there's still some gaps that I need to acknowledge that are a bit annoying. And I don't know if this is a spoiler. We see the saints in this series, which we didn't know if that existed. We thought they were just powerful Grisha, but some of them have been stuck in the Shadowfold for a couple of thousand years, and I didn't like that bit of world building. I guess it made sense in a way for the people to learn the things they needed to learn, but I didn't like it. It felt inconsistent with the rest of the world, which I think maybe it was meant to be that, because the Shadowfold was kind of that liminal space that's meant to feel a bit different. But I personally was not a fan, and feel like that bit could have gone differently, because this is a plot thing now, but I'm trying to think of how to resolve this plot-wise, and I would say you could still have those saints doing their thing, but maybe not in the Shadowfold. Maybe they'd just be in a cave somewhere, because, you know, that's how people find Grisha, right? You listen for the stories. That's the thing that Language of Forms is about, which I haven't read. And Nina says it in one of these two, and then they mention it again in King of Scars. So I feel like at one of these miracle sites or somewhere, the things could have just been there. I do still think I would like that more, because I was not a fan of this whole mumbo jumbo. For the rest of the plot, I think it's a bit of a mess. The actual plot doesn't start until like halfway through, probably. The beginning is just setting up what court looks like now, and then like people, they're like, oh shit, we need a plot, and everything kicks into high gear, and it's a bit of a mess. I love Nina's plot line, but it didn't interact at all with the main plot line, which is unusual and a bit weird, and it didn't make that much sense to me. But, you know, it'd be like that sometimes, and it will probably get resolved in the second book, so it's a bit difficult for me to review this without having the whole series there, but for now I would count it as a flaw. And most things with that starting up so slowly, or like not at all until halfway through the book, is it didn't feel proportional at all. It felt like, oh, this is half of the book, and then this is half of the book. And plot-wise, it's the other way around. This much happens in the first half of the book, and this much happens in the second half of the book. So I thought it was a bit of a mess. But then again, I think characters are vaguely more important. And the characters in this were amazing. I love all of their characters and character development, and the kind of expose of Nikolai's character. Because already in the Grisha trilogy, I feel like he's the character with the most potential. Because everyone else just feels like they're a bit of one thing, you know? Elena is nothing at all. Mel is a loyal tracker to her, I guess. Zoya is just a heartless bitch. Genya is pretty, and I guess she's nice, but and I feel like Nikolai already in that is like, he is portrayed as someone who fools everyone, but I feel like he already has the most depth, because he is a bunch of things. Elena's trying to think about what is a real part of that, but I feel like all of it is really part of Nikolai's personality, and I feel like that's really delved into, which I appreciate a lot, because he's a great character. And I'm really happy how Lee Bardugo managed to take these characters from the original trilogy, change them so much in this book and make them interesting, and do so much more with them than she did in the original trilogy, without it seeming out of character. All of these characters are still the same characters, and very obviously so, but they're much more interesting and developed, and they develop over time, and it's really cool. Nikolai is sassy and broken, and those are some of my favourite kinds of characters. Zoya is fierce and wonderful, and she has a small heart, and we love her. Nina is lovely and ruthless in this, and I think Nina's arc is interesting because in Crooked Kingdom, she and Matthias were like, we're gonna fix the world. And in King of Scars, Nina is kind of hating the world, which is fair enough. Especially hating Fyoda, which is fair enough. Especially hating the Trishkel, which is fair enough. But she goes from totally hating that to like kind of doing those missions in Fyoda and going like, yeah, no, we can probably still save the country. It's an interesting arc, and I want to see how she does it, because obviously she won't save the whole country by herself, but it would be interesting to see if she can like do that, like believe, like what she can do. I believe she can do a whole lot, but I'm more interested in the personal change she will go through in the next book, like if she will truly believe that there is a Fyoda worth saving. Because in the beginning of the book she was like, no, this country is fucked. And then at the end she was like determined to help the country, but she still didn't seem super convinced. So I want to know how she developed further in the other book. Also, Leonie was great. I love this sunshiny character and the Stormcloud character, Aldrich and Leonie, like them together are really cute, and I hope we see more of them. Isaac is, one of my notes was just Isaac in capital letters, because I loved him and he deserved so much more. I feel like this book had a good angst to banter ratio. Like there was still more banter than most books would have realistically dealt with in the dark situations they would deal with. But it's a good thing, I think, that for Nikolai it's acknowledged as a coping mechanism. I mean, the rest of my notes say Nikolai is an amazing character and a complex character, and also the Slytherin king that Ravka needs, which I agree with, obviously, is my note, but that's my thoughts on him. And my last note just said fuck the Saints, apart from that bear guy, and I will stand by it. So overall, the plot is a bit of a mess, and so is the world at this point, but I'm interested to see how Lee Bardugo will tie that together and fix it up in the second book of the series. The characters, I was blown away by how well she did that and developed them from the Grisha trilogy to this trilogy, this duology, this book. So I think that's amazing, and I love that she gave them another chance, because it had the potential, and I think she really brought out the potential in that. So yeah, I would give this, I think I gave it 4 stars. It's good, but it has, like, maybe that's more than it deserves with the obvious plot flaws, but I love the character so much that I'm giving it 4 stars. So that is my review for the whole Grishaverse until now, apart from Language of Thorns, because I don't care. And I mean, this still needs a duology, this still needs a second book, but it's fine. I love the world, I love Lee Bardugo's writing, she is a phenomenal writer, and I strive to write something as well as she did with Six of Crows, which is still my favourite. And that is it for this video. I will see you again another time. Goodbye.